Welcome to another edition of Green is Good, the ISRI edition of Green is Good, here in downtown Vancouver at the Vancouver Convention Center. We're so honored to have with us today David Wagger. He's the Director of Environmental Management at ISRI. Welcome to Green is Good, David.
Thank you very much, John. I'm happy to be here.
Well, to learn more about your great organization, our audience can go to www.isri.org, and we're going to talk about ISRI, what you do there, and more specifically, we're going to talk about one-bin recycling today. But before we get into that, share a little bit about your story, David, how you got to ISRI, and what was everything leading up to your interest in sustainability and recycling and things of that such.
Well, sure, happy to do that. Well, I grew up in California. I wasn't born there. I grew up in California, San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
And things like recycling and things that were green, but we didn't call them green, were quite common then. So I kind of had that from my upbringing. So it seemed perfectly natural to be recycle,
right,
conserve energy, be energy efficient, and those types of things. So I pretty much carried that with me in my entire life, at least growing up from about the age of 5.
Okay.
And I always had sort of environmental bent. Even I studied chemical engineering in college and in graduate school. And I always had a sort of a focus on trying to make operations better environmentally. And I ended up in Washington, D.C. after graduate school, and I was on a fellowship with the Agency for International Development working on energy and environment in developing countries. So it was kind of bringing that same sense of environmental conservation, but helping people, too, who needed help in development. So I've always had that germ, that seed of sort of sustainability and green, even before we called it that.
Right.
I was in environmental consulting for a while, and how I got to ISRI is somewhat by accident. I would say that my career, so to speak, was not planned. It was more serendipitous. So It just so happened that I ran into Robin Wiener, the president of ISRI. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who ISRI was. We had a conversation, and we both have kids about the same age, and we discovered we have kind of similar backgrounds. And she explained what ISRI was, and I said, "Oh, it's very interesting. It sounds like an interesting organization."
Yeah.
So literally a week later, I read an ad for the position of Director of Environmental Management, which is the position I have now.
Right.
So she gave me a card. I emailed her and said, "Well, what do you think?" She said, "Send me a resume, and we'll see if there's a good fit."
Right.
So it took a process, a couple of interviews, and basically 3 months later, I was working for ISRI.
That's funny. And as the Director of Environmental Management, what are your duties at ISRI, specifically speaking?
Well, I would say the big concept is member service.
Okay.
So we're a trade association. It's basically, to oversimplify it, a club of like companies in the same industry. We have recyclers. We have companies that provide services and equipment to recyclers.
Sure.
But my first priority is to address their environmental needs, whether it's understanding a regulation, if they have a compliance issue, if they need training, say, in stormwater management, or how to manage things like dust control and other types of things. I help them with that. I will also operate or work on their behalf when there's a regulation, say, that perhaps could be better crafted for our industry. I will write comments. I'll discuss regulations with regulators, both at state level and national level. So and I'll have opportunities to advocate and teach at conventions like one we're having in Vancouver. I just moderated a workshop on design for recycling, which is a very important policy principle for ISRI,
right,
trying to get things that are manufactured to be manufactured with recycling in mind, so that at their end of life, they can be safely manufactured, or in some cases reused if it's, say, electronics or other types
right
of devices. And it's good for our industry, it's good for our members, it's good for the environment, it's a win-win-win. So
Gotcha.
that's really kind of what my goals are and my responsibilities are.
So today we're going to talk about one of the elements of recycling, one-bin recycling.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love you to start with the macro principle of what one-bin recycling is, and then we'll take a deeper dive into all the different other types of bins that are being used and how one bin on a compare and contrast compares against everything else.
One-bin recycling is a very specific term, and just a little bit of background, ISRI represents private sector recyclers.
Right.
So it's typically business to business. There'll be a manufacturer that has excess scrap, metal, plastic, paper, what have you, and our members recycle it. The one-bin recycling is really down at the municipal level, but the connect is typically commodities in common between what's collected on the municipal level and what our members collect and recycle in the private sector. There's a connection there through the commodities.
Gotcha.
Specifically, paper and plastic, I think, are the ones that are sort of the key ones, at least at this intersection between what we do and one bin. Now, one bin recycling or one bin collection is a shorthand way of saying, in communities where they don't have specific recycling collection, they do have garbage collection, it turns out that everyone puts all of their garbage and things that are recyclable into one bin. So you get things like food residues or detergent residues that are contacting recycled materials that, if they were not commingled with this material, would be quite clean and quite good, high quality for recycling. What happens is, one bin causes the commingling, which causes a quality degradation of recyclable commodities, and that's bad, I think, for everybody. Right. And that's really kind of what's at stake. Paper is especially vulnerable because paper really needs to be clean. So if you get food residue on it, it reduces the quality and it makes it less likely that it's going to be a recyclable commodity that a paper mill wants to have. So it could either end up in a landfill, or because it has energy value, food residue, for instance, doesn't really affect the energy value. It could end up going toward energy recovery, which really isn't recycling. So it could end up taking a lot of things that would end up being recycled in a new paper, a new plastic, and send them along to be combusted for energy recovery, and then you don't have those materials anymore.
Right.
You may have the internal energy contained in them, but there's no longer an opportunity to recycle them again and again and again.
So for our audience members and for myself, because I'm a little confused, how is one bin then different than single stream recycling?
Right. And before I came to ISRI, I didn't really understand the different lingo there. But
right.
So one bin is the commingling of basically garbage and recyclables. Single stream is the separate collection of all recyclables in one container. So in a single stream collection, recycling scheme,
right.
You've got separate collection of garbage by itself, and then you have separate collection of glass, metal, paper, and plastic in one container itself. What happens is that one container of recyclables then needs to go to a facility typically called a MRF, or a materials recovery facility, to separate the glass from the paper, from the plastics from the metal.
So one bin is really one bin, only single stream really means a bifurcation of
Correct.
Waste and recyclables. But when you put the recyclables in one recyclable bin, is the possibility, even though there's allegedly no waste in it, is it still contamination and degradation possible in that one bin?
I think yes, it's possible. It tends to be more feasible to separate it
Gotcha.
in an economic fashion. There's even higher levels of recycling called dual stream, and we have dual stream where I live.
Okay.
Where we've got separate garbage collection. We have a large container for all paper products. Magazines, cereal boxes, cardboard, wrapping paper, newspaper. That goes in one bin. The other bin has plastics and glass and metal. So that's dual stream. And I suppose you could, even if, say, San Francisco, I think, has 3 streams. They have organic separately.
Right.
That's
right.
separate from the garbage itself. So you could, in theory, have as many streams as you wanted if you thought that you could do it economically and with good fidelity, that the sorting is actually very good at the sort of the residential level or the commercial level.
Gotcha. And then so explain now, where is the battleground right now across America with regards to various cities and municipalities? What's become state of the art? Is it one bin? Is it single stream? Is it dual stream? What's going on and what's at stake here?
My sense of it is the following, is that there is a large push, not unreasonably, for states to improve the recycling rates. And often what that means is they give targets to their municipalities and localities that you need to be recycling. In many states that have low recycling rates, they really want to raise them, and that's good.
Right.
However, what it also tends to mean is that there are many communities that have no recycling program at all. And it could be that those communities also say they don't have infinite resources to create a recycling program. So one bin collection is happening by default. If they have no separate recycling collection, everything goes into one bin.
Right.
So the simplest thing to do is to put a material recycling facility on the back end of that.
Right.
So all of the one bin materials go into a materials recycling facility, often called a dirty MRF, because the materials that are going into it are commingled and cross-contaminated.
Compared to a pure MRF, which you just referenced a couple minutes ago.
Which would have, say, a single stream input or even a dual stream input.
Right.
So what happens is
now you're a dirty MRF. What do we do?
Well, the thing is that there's a lot of economic pressure on the one hand to minimize costs. On the other hand, there's a lot of pressure to increase recycling rates. The simplest thing to do doesn't require new trucks, more employees to drive, let's say 2 sets of trucks, one for recycling and one for garbage. The simplest thing to do to avoid all that expense is to have a MRF put on the back end of it so that you can send all of this and hopefully get recyclables out of it of a good enough quality that they will hit the recycling stream and end up being new plastic, new paper, metal, so forth.
Gotcha.
With the things that are not recyclable quality either being landfilled or going to energy recovery. And there's even a value proposition on the energy recovery side. From our perspective, from ISRI's perspective, energy recovery isn't recycling. Okay. And to the extent that it takes paper and directs it not to recycling, but in that direction because of contamination, we think that's bad for everybody.
For our listeners and our viewers and our audience that just joined us, we're honored to have with us David Wagger. He's the Director of Environmental Management of ISRI, www.isri.org. This is the ISRI Green is Good edition from downtown Vancouver at the Vancouver Convention Center. David, so incineration is not recycling. Is that towards the waste to energy model, and that means incineration, and that we're not considering recycling right now for ISRI's purposes?
Well, I would say even EPA agrees that energy recovery or incineration, well, energy recovery means that you are taking a material as a fuel,
right?
You're combusting it, and the energy that comes out of the combustion process generates steam or electricity.
Right.
That's energy recovery. Incineration is simply burning it to get rid of it so it doesn't go into landfill. So there's no product that comes out of it, whether it's a material or whether it's energy. Although some would say that if there's any metal contained in the material, it will drop out of the bottom and that has some value. But from our perspective, I think EPA would agree that in the hierarchy of materials management, that's not considered recycling.
Gotcha. So talk then a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of one bin, and where do you fall and ISRI fall philosophically on the one bin movement?
The advantages and disadvantages actually apply to different stakeholders in this whole thing. So the advantage to the municipality that needs to have a recycling program but can't afford, let's say, the extra collection and bins and so forth, is to implement that as a way to get some recycling out of what they currently do.
Gotcha.
It minimizes their cost. It produces recyclables of some quality. So I think from their perspective, it meets their need to raise the recycling rate. On the other hand, it has the high probability of taking commodities that could be recycled easily if they were separately collected and making them less recyclable. Some of it, say the paper and the plastic that has energy value, might end up going toward the energy recovery side, and fewer and lower quality material will get to the recycling side.
If we were to poll the great members of ISRI here at this convention, where do most members today fall on this whole one bin phenomena?
Well, I think they're fully behind ISRI's policy, and I'll try to summarize it.
Yeah.
Basically, ISRI supports separation of materials from each other that are distinct commodities and the maximum collection so that you can get the maximum amount of recyclables out of this. So they support pre-sorting. They are against commingling of materials because it lowers the quality of recyclables that ends up being, let's say, separated from that stream of material.
Right.
So, and I think that I can't think of any member that would be against that policy. I mean, we're about recycling. You want high-quality commodities because, quite frankly, it's better for us, it's better for our customers, it's better for society to have recycling that has greater economic value, lower environmental impact, because it takes a lot of effort to actually clean materials that are cleanable. So it sort of lowers the value environmental protection proposition.
For all the stakeholders.
Correct.
So therefore, one bin is really not, even though, as you say, philosophically and in practice, it would help a municipality, city, or community that's desperate to raise their recycling rates and managing a very tight budget. But overall, the contamination that carries along with this really degrades the value of the recyclables and therefore isn't good for anybody in the recycling chain.
I would say that's a fair characterization. I think the challenge is to go to the municipalities and give them the value proposition of actual single stream or dual stream recycling. I think there is a value proposition in there, but because of their own priorities and the way that they manage their own, say, budgets and operations, I think that's a conversation that we need to have and really try to understand each other, where we're coming from.
Is part of ISRI's role then, David, in the education of communities and community leaders, city leaders, municipality leaders across America to find a better way?
I certainly think that's true. Another disadvantage that I didn't raise about one bin is to the extent that people think, oh, I don't have to do anything to recycle. All I have to do is throw it into that with the garbage and it's done. It's out of sight, out of mind. That kind of is almost de-educating people, desensitizing them that recycling well takes some amount of intentionality. That it's helpful to think about it. Because what happens is, if they go away from home or they're somewhere else, they may just instinctively just throw it in the garbage can because that's what they do at home. It's sort of a reflex.
Right.
So I think that it also is sort of a reversal of all the education efforts going back to Earth Day originally back in the 1970s. It could sort of de-educate people, desensitize it, even make recycling sort of lose the value proposition. It remains unclear how it will unfold in terms of people's behavior, but we think it's probably going to be a negative behavioral impact with respect to recycling overall.
And against the recycling movement that we've seen action and activity in, especially just even in the last 10 years, the sustainability revolution and movement has seemed to go into full steam finally here in the United States.
Right. And certainly I think there are many stakeholders that would agree that sustainability includes if you create a material, you want to keep it sort of in commerce, in use at all phases of its life cycle before eventually it will become so difficult to use again that eventually will have to be disposed of. That happens through degradation, through oxidation, all sorts of processes. But it's really keeping the materials that we took all the effort to make in the first place in play.
You know, our company is a proud member of ISRI, and we're so proud of all the efforts that ISRI does. What we love to give here on Green is Good is solutions and things that our audience can do. You know, now knowing and learning myself today, and I'm sure you've done a great job also educating our audience members, that one bin really is not great for recycling purposes and not great for our country and our environment overall. What can our listeners and our audience members do to help their community improve their recycling practices? What can they do? Because this is something that can be not only a top-down effort from ISRI on down, but it could be a ground-up effort also.
Well, I think that as citizens of where they live, certainly they have the opportunity to work with their elected officials to raise their awareness about the importance of recycling and collecting recyclables, doing it well.
Right.
Where it provides the most value to society as well as to the municipality. Again, that's a conversation that we need to have, and certainly from the grassroots, that can move a lot of people to perhaps make different decisions than perhaps other forces might want them to do without the input from the citizenry.
You know, we're down to the last couple minutes, David. What's your feeling in terms of the future of one bin recycling and the future of better separation and less contamination of recycling in the years to come? This is 2015. Is there going to be a leveling off, an increasing of one bin, or now we're going to start seeing it move in the other direction?
Well, I think that's very hard to predict.
Okay.
Again, it depends on where a municipality is coming from.
Yeah.
So for municipalities or localities that don't have a recycling program, in some sense, one bin recycling with a MRF on the back end, a dirty MRF on the back end, is a step up. What we fear is municipalities that have single or dual stream to say, you know what, I see what they're doing, and you know what, maybe I can reduce our costs. And if they're telling me that this MRF that can take one bin commingled materials can do just as good a job as pre-sorted materials, maybe they'll actually go backslide into this other behavior, this other one bin scheme, which I think would be extremely bad. So we have to see sort of which segments of localities are going in which direction. Some, it might be a step up, some it might be a step down. I'd be concerned about the step down more than about the step up. I think certainly at some point you can approach the ones that have put the MRF on the back end and say, well, I think it's a relatively inexpensive matter to do single stream with the system that you have, and you can migrate them to single stream or dual stream. I think going from single and dual back to one bin would be unhelpful.
Unhelpful. Any last thoughts for our audience before we sign off today?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you and reach out to your audience and our audience, and certainly anyone should feel free to contact ISRI, contact me. That's my watch. If they have questions or they want to share their thoughts. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, David. David Wagner. David, the Director of Environmental Management at ISRI. This is the ISRI edition of Green is Good. And of course, you can find David and all of his colleagues at www.isri.org. Thank you, David, for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Your thoughts and your comments today were very inspirational and also very educational. And you are truly living proof that green is good.